Since September the 11th, America has seemed locked into its war on terror. One might believe that American diplomatic horizons stop at the suburbs of Baghdad or Kabul. But while focusing on the vestiges of the World Trade Center, the country is secretly preparing for a new conflict, an undeclared war, but one that is the top priority for the intelligence community and the White House. Ahead of Al-Qaeda, more important than the quagmire in Iraq, the Chinese threat, America's new war.
They have a term they call comprehensive national power, which is economic, political, military, all together, cultural. And they say this is the essence of China. This is the time for China to rise. Our time has come. This is the Tang Dynasty again. We are a great power. We are a world power. They are playing the old Sun Tzu game, winning the fight without firing a bullet, or that isn't what Sun Tzu said, but win the battle without losing men. That's the best way of winning. And I think they're very conscious of this, but they're willing to fight.
The world will, run by three first-class countries. One is USA, United States of America. Another is USE, United States of Europe. Then the Greater China. At this point, at the current point, I think the possibility to see a USE is very slim. But the USA stay as top one country is something sure, right? And as for the possibility of Greater China, the possibility is something in between. Right? So I tend to think Sino-US relations will be one of the most important bilateral ties in the coming years. And this bilateral tie will decide the nature of international relations in 21st century. If this bilateral tie is confrontation-oriented, then the whole 21st century will be bound by confrontation.
Kinmen Island, the actual frontier between the two giants, and where the ultimate confrontation may take place. This little island belongs to Taiwan, but it is only 2 kilometers from the Chinese coast. From here, one can see the inaccessible banks of Fujian province, where hundreds of ballistic missiles point at Taipei. "24 hours a day, for 60 years, Taiwan has been watching Communist China. This island, regularly threatened by Beijing, has been bombarded thousands of times. It has never surrendered. America has sent a message to Beijing. The fall of Kinmen would lead to a direct confrontation. We're in the Strait of Taiwan. It's here that a military clash might one day break out.
Taiwan is one of those emotional hot-button issues, the way Jerusalem is to Palestinians and Israelis, the way Kosovo was to the Albanians and Serbs. And for most mainland Chinese, Taiwan is rightfully a Chinese province. This was territory that they believe was stolen from China by Japan in the 1895 war, and that the United States prevented reunification during the early stages of the Cold War because of our opposition to communism.
In 1996, here in the Straits of Taiwan, China and America engaged in their biggest military standoff. The ongoing elections in Taiwan annoyed the regime in Beijing. So the Chinese army decided to launch huge military maneuvers to test the Americans' reaction. After several days of this Chinese show of force, Washington deployed 2 aircraft carriers. It was the first time the two countries came face to face. For several days, there was extreme tension between the two nuclear powers.
When the Chinese fired short-range ballistic nuclear-capable missiles off the north and south coast of Taiwan and carried out a major, what we call a live-fire exercise. And Jiang Zemin was there, the president. They were using some very belligerent language. This is when we dispatched 2 carrier battle groups off the East Coast. And this was a show, this was force. And the matter quickly dissipated.
The Chinese thought this was excessive. They thought that they had an understanding with the U.S., that they would have a limited display to show their seriousness on the issue. The U.S. would adopt a very limited response, and then they would both back away. They regarded the deployment of a second carrier as excessive and in some ways as humiliating to the Chinese, because the Chinese couldn't do much to deter or complicate the deployment of those carriers.
I know this story well, and I can tell you that the truth is very different from the American propaganda. I was there in 1996. The Americans had promised to send an aircraft carrier to Taiwan for Election Day to protect Taiwan. But actually, the only American ship near Taiwan was the electronic spy ship Bunker Hill. And it was more than 200 nautical miles away. And the first American aircraft carrier was 600 nautical miles from Taiwan. So the truth is that the Americans announced that they were coming, but they kept their distance. They wanted at all costs to avoid any incident, and they didn't dare approach our army.
Even if the Americans didn't take much of a risk, in the eyes of the world, they reaffirmed a sacred principle of their foreign policy. They support Taiwan. And they will continue to do so, regardless of China's growing power.
I think believes Taiwan is very important for a number of reasons, not to mention the fact that it's our 8th largest trading partner, our 6th largest market for agricultural goods. It's one of America's most important sources of high-tech semiconductor products. Even though they're imported to the United States via China, they're made in Taiwan. But that, of course, isn't the only thing. The real reason I think America has a commitment to Taiwan is because Taiwan is a democracy. It is, in fact, the most vibrant and dynamic democracy in East Asia. And it's a democracy that came to fruition under the pressure of the U.S. government, primarily the Congress, after 40 years of very tight authoritarian rule by a regime that came from mainland China. I think, however, the real reason that the United States, especially the Pentagon, is so concerned about Taiwan is that it has been a very strong defense and intelligence partner for the last 50 years, including the last 30 years since the breaking of relations with the Republic of China on Taiwan. We have still maintained a very strong defense relationship and a very strong intelligence collection relationship with Taiwan.
I would say the United States is committed to Taiwan. This goes back historically a long, long way. World War II, we were there. And we were looking for a strong, unified, democratic China. Well, we got 2/3 of it. Strong and unified, not democratic. Now we're calling China a responsible stakeholder. We've got half of it. We've got a stakeholder, but not a responsible one yet. The U.S. feels that we have an obligation, legal, moral, to Taiwan, that we cannot stand idly by and let this be taken over by what looks like an authoritarian, communist-influenced power. This cannot be.
Taiwan, an island of 23 million inhabitants, 250 kilometers from the Chinese coast, is today the most explosive strategic issue between China and the United States. Taipei, the capital, flaunts its economic success. It is one of the biggest centers in the world for the electronics industry. A modern city, free, young, and always noisy. In 1895, Taiwan was invaded by Japan. 50 years later, after the Japanese defeat, peace treaties returned the territory to China, a China which was then in the midst of a civil war between Mao's communists and Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists. When the battle turned in Mao's favor, General Chiang Kai-shek, aided by the Americans, took refuge in Taiwan with his soldiers. Since then, two Chinese governments have coexisted. In Beijing, the communist regime that controls the entire mainland. And in Taipei, the nationalist regime, having become little by little a democracy, calling itself the Republic of China, which rules only Taiwan. Officially, these two governments both claim to be the legitimate representatives of all the Chinese. Taiwan is not recognized as a state by the UN. Only 20 small countries maintain diplomatic relations with the island. A fragile independence, while Beijing still considers Taiwan as the 23rd province of the People's Republic, a rebel province that the regime intends to reunite with the motherland.
I would say two major motivations. There are many others, but two major ones. The first one is national pride, unification of China. They are committed to this. This is a strong emotional drive in China. And you don't downplay it. It's real. It's powerful. The second is strategic. They know through history, if Taiwan is in unfriendly hands, that China is very badly affected.
If you turn the globe around, and if you were the Navy commander of the Chinese armed forces, then you will see the only way to protect my coastline is to extend our defense and power projection capability far away from our territory. Why I need to do that? Because the economic center, financial center, education center, production center of today's China is all on the coastline. So the Navy's mission is to make sure that nobody touched this so I can continue to grow. To go out, you have a big stone right there. You can go other places, but there is a stopper, a stone blocking your way, and that's Taiwan.
Now, Taiwan depends on the outcome of elections that could change its executive power, and stock market risks that can endanger its economy. Beijing, nevertheless, has understood that whatever the mood on the island, especially when it is favorable to political reconciliation, the strategy must never change. Imperturbable, the communist regime continues. On one hand, to offer Taiwan favorable business privileges on the mainland. On the other hand, it regularly reiterates its military threats. If the Taiwanese are too insistent about their desire for independence, they're going to have to fight for it. Whatever Taiwan's political tendencies, Beijing's position doesn't change one iota. A freeway in the middle of the island of Taiwan. In a few minutes, it has been transformed into a landing strip. The population watches this military exercise. They're used to it. French Mirage 2000 and American F-16 jets land and take off with an enormous roar. Faced with the uncertainty of American support, Taiwan organizes its own defense. Everyone knows that the airports will be the first target. Strategists on both sides of the strait affirm that the war will first begin with an air battle.